Welcome to this special edition of Beyond the Headlines Decision 2016. I'm Jesse Jackson. I'm filling in for Mike Lenz, doing my best impression. In today's program, we're joined by Senator Betty Little, who's seeking re-election in the 45th State Senate District, and her challenger, Green Party candidate Steve Ruzbacki. We'll be discussing the issues facing the 45th Senate District with both candidates when we come back. There is nothing more important in the election process than for you to know where the candidates stand and what they care about. All the political coverage on Look Media is made possible by the generous support of the companies you see here. Please support them. Welcome back to this special edition of Beyond the Headlines. I'm Jesse Jackson. Thanks for joining us for this debate in the race for the 45th State Senate District. Now, the seat is currently held by Republican Betty Little, who's serving her 7th term, seeking the 8th term, right, Betty?
Yes.
Wow. Her challenger is Green Party candidate Steve Ruzbacki. Welcome, Steve. And thank you both for agreeing to participate. Now, the 45th State Senate District is a large district. It encompasses Clinton, Essex, Franklin, Warren, and parts of St. Lawrence and Washington counties. We're going to be asking the candidates a series of questions. Now, after each question, the other candidate will be given an opportunity to respond. And hopefully, we can have a thoughtful discussion about the issues facing our communities. So welcome to both. Thanks for coming in. Thanks for taking the time.
Nice.
Thanks for having me.
Betty, 8th term. Wow. What interests you about politics?
It's funny you asked because I did an interview yesterday with a 5th grade Girl Scout. And one of the questions she asked was, when did you decide to become a politician? And I'd like to think I'm not a politician, but you know, I think it happens. You're interested in government, and then you know, you see what's being done and ideas, and you think, I would have done that differently. Why aren't they looking at this? And wouldn't this be the better way to do things? And so you kind of get involved. Now, I was a teacher, and then for 19 years I was at home with 6 children, raised them. And then my youngest one was in kindergarten. And I had done a lot of volunteer work on the Recreation Commission in the town of Queensbury and things like that for my school children and everything. So there was an opening. Tom Murphy, who was a county legislator at the time, died during his term of office. And I thought, well, I'd really like to do that. Why not try it? And I thought I could do a good job with it. And there were issues going on at the county at the time. The biggest issue was the trash plant. And I really thought they ought to be doing something different. So I thought it's time to speak up and get involved. And I ran for it and was elected. So I served there for nine and a half years. And then I ran for the Assembly in 1995. And I served in the Assembly for 7 years. And now it's been 14 years in the Senate. And it's really an honor and a privilege to represent the people of this district. So many hard-working people, and really working hard to make a living and also to improve their community. So I really feel it's a privilege.
I got it. You know, it takes a certain kind of person to go into public service. You know, you're kind of a newcomer to this, Steve. What drives you?
Well, I guess I've always been a student of history and always been interested in what's going on, how things really work. And I just have real strong feelings that a lot of our public policies have been counterproductive and maybe well-intentioned, but not getting the results intended, and yet we keep doing the same things. And I guess I think I felt an increasing sense of futility from people I love and talking to folks in the community, and it's particularly troubling to see that from young people. And just feeling so strongly that certain things have to be done and not seeing any steps in many areas what I think are in the right direction. Just I really felt an obligation to do everything I can.
Got it, sure. Let's talk about some of the issues. Tourism is so central to the economy of our region. We should always be looking to strengthen tourism. What have you planning in that regard?
Well, for one thing, some of the things we've needed to do to strengthen tourism is we have better cell coverage for helping people. Certainly, cell coverage in the Adirondacks has actually saved lives by having that. We need to have good roads, so we have fought really hard to make sure that in New York State, that upstate gets a good share of the money for the implementation of infrastructure. And there was a 5-year plan for the MTA, and we wouldn't complete that until we had a 5-year plan and money for upstate roads and bridges, which we've done. And I think you can see that we're doing a lot with roads and bridges this year. But you know, we need that. We have to be welcoming. You have to help businesses. We have worked very hard. A lot of restaurants and the health department and the state liquor authority are very involved, and we help people get through that and work at it and try to simplify it. And certainly for the liquor authority, a lot of their rules and regulations dated back to Prohibition and were not workable and making it very difficult for businesses to get their license. Took too long, too much money invested, and that's been improved.
You know, Steve, a lot of people would agree with a lot of that, but they would also say we have to be really careful of overdevelopment. You know, in terms of tourism, what are your thoughts?
Well, my thoughts is that really the treasure we have here is our natural splendor. So to me, I think kind of environmental conservation and restoration has to be paramount. So one of my concerns is that oftentimes, although we have public hearings and we try to bring all stakeholders to the table, I often believe from the outcomes of some of these things that it is tied with people's their moneyed interests are making more of an impact on decisions than just really the public welfare. So I see that as a central problem. But I certainly think the number one thing we need to do is do everything we can to help conserve our environment, like I said, and restore it wherever possible.
Betty, what do you think about that?
Well, two of the things that have been very important and I've been involved in is water quality and the boat washing stations, keeping the invasives out of our lakes, providing funding for Lake George Park Commission, the Adirondack invasive species program, and that's been very important, as well as really trying to see that businesses have internet service because so much is done on the internet. The other thing is signage. Because we're within the Adirondack Park, for a long time, a number of years, we tried to get signs on the Northway to support attractions, and we were not able to do it. And we did do it this year. So we have some attraction signs, I think at 5 exits, and you know, they're not for gas stations and lodging and that kind of thing. There are signs, the universal signs that have a gas tank or you know, show that they're lodging. But to have some attractions to show this is where you get off for the Wild Center and Tupper Lake. This is where you get off for things that are in Lake Luzerne and Lake George and Chestertown and those areas. So,
you know, I think the most important thing there is to try to strike a balance. Don't you agree?
Well, you know, and yet I think sometimes the concept of balance makes it sound like there's some tension between prosperity and environmental conservation. And the more I study it, I really think they're inextricable. I think, you know, very often if we're looking at just economics, we're often looking at the economics of the next quarter, the next year. We're not looking generations down the road like we need to. So I think we need to learn from the Native Americans in that score. We need to ask every question, is this sustainable, and how is this going to benefit our grandchildren and many generations out?
Got it, Betty?
well, I think we do have to work on the environment, but on the water quality issue, so many of our small towns, in order to promote tourism, they need water, sewer, and municipal water systems.
Right.
So this year in the budget, the governor had some money in the budget for it, but in the Senate, we added another $100 million for this year and $100 million for next year. So I think it amounts to $350 million in the next 2 years for rural districts to be able to apply for these grants. Mm-hmm. For instance, in Salem on their Main Street, they have a few restaurants, but the septic systems aren't large enough for any of those to expand or to have more. And they actually are in for a grant to do a feasibility study so that they would have municipal water and sewer. And that certainly helps our environment, mm-hmm. every place that we can, and upgrade the needs of what are going on. Lake George is looking for money to try to help with their new water treatment system that they need to replace. So it's constant.
It's
constant trying to get, the taxpayers in our communities are so small that they can't really fund all this without grant money from the state.
Got it. Move to another topic. I think the drug war has been around for 45 years plus, right? Those of us that are old enough remember the 60s, remember the 70s. Seemed in the 80s, we took kind of a crazy turn in the 80s. Now it's pervasive, and it's heinous because the drugs are the opioids and it's heroin. What's your feeling about the state tackling this problem? What should we do?
Well, it's very necessary that we do something. We are losing so many young people to heroin addiction. You just read in the paper, a 25-year-old dying suddenly, unexpectedly, and sometimes the family will say that it's because of their long time fight with drug addiction. So I think the heroin program needs more detox facilities. We need more residential treatment in our budgets this year. And in legislation, we have gone after the insurance companies because they were saying that if you needed help, you had to do day treatment, and you had to fail day treatment twice. So you had to do 2 sessions of day treatment, fail it twice before you could get residential treatment. And it's been proven that the residential treatment is better for people, certainly help them really kick this addiction. I've been to hearings and have heard such horrible stories.
I know, we hear them too.
And now a mother who had her son actually put in jail because he had written bad checks on their checking account, but she couldn't get any help for him. It was her only child, so she reported him and he went into the Clinton County Jail. That's not the place to get help.
That's right.
So, and we have done a lot through the years. You mentioned the 70s and the 80s. I supported that program where, a lot of people got out of prison because they were inappropriately sentenced for long terms for things they shouldn't have been.
That brings up the question of incarceration, right? Some people would say, let's throw all these drug dealers in jail. I remember that time period. What are your feelings about this, Steve?
Well, the fact is, a lot of these issues we don't talk honestly about. Anyone who studies these issues seriously realizes that there are drug kingpins at the top that actually profit tremendously, and that it's an international thing. If you look at our policies in Afghanistan, that's directly tied to the heroin that's coming into the country. And that the history of the drug war is a history of any targeted substance. The more it's targeted and the more money that's used to combat it, these are fundamentally counterproductive policies, because what happens is the price goes up, the associated interest, violence, and then sort of hypocrisy and mendacity from people at all levels of government for refusing to address really the things that are going on. These things are used to fund covert activities, the money. And certainly there's violent competition. It happened during alcohol prohibition. It's happening. If you look at since 1971, when Nixon launched the drug war, we spent $1.5 trillion, and the problems have gotten worse. And now we're having legislation written by pharmaceutical companies. The number one lobby against cannabis reform is the pharmaceutical lobby. And specifically, if you want to break that down, it's the fentanyl manufacturers. So we've taken if you want to just look at the opiate or opioid is the synthetic, opiate is the natural. Before there was any drug law, the first drug law in early 1870s was in California against opium users. Opium was certainly way more concentrated than poppies, which are the natural thing, which are almost harmless if we had poppy tea. But every effort to attack this has resulted, heroin was touted as a cure for morphine addiction. And now we have more people dying from OxyContin and fentanyl overdoses than we do from heroin.
So let me interject here just for a second. The Green Party supports legalizing marijuana. Granted that you're laying the framework here, but do you have a proposal? Tell me why you would support the legalization of marijuana and how you feel the things that you just stated. How are we going to resolve these things?
Well, I think we need to be honest about the reality, and that is these markets have never been under control. Never. We can't even keep them out of our prisons. And the fact is, the more we take a law enforcement approach to it, the more we're enriching organized crime. So cannabis reform is something supported by the majority of the American people. It's beneficial for many folks. At the same time, I think we need to do it the right way. It seems to me lots of people are laying a framework, and the state has already started to where a few people, you have 4 corporations that can supply cannabis for the whole state. Very difficult. A lot of people need cannabis and can't get it because of its scarcity here legally. And if we're going to simply funnel money to a few corporations, I think we're doing it wrong. I think what we need to really do is try to have shared prosperity in everything, and I think cannabis would be a good vehicle for that. In the history of the suppression of both the cannabis plant for food, fiber, and therapeutic purposes, and this isn't often I hear from people, we need more studies. The fact is, this is a plant that's been used by humans for thousands of years, and it was used commonly by doctors, and most doctors didn't support it. It was really a sleight of hand in the 30s, and it was hysteria that keeps popping up.
You know what I hear. One of my concerns that I hear from people who contact us is that, oh, okay, so they treat marijuana as though it's harmless. And the drug dealers take advantage of that by saying, hey, they used to say marijuana was dangerous, and now they're trying to make it legal. So, opioids, opiates, and heroin, it's the same thing. 20 years from now, it'll be just commonplace.
The effects I see are devastating to families with drug addiction. But I did a lot of soul searching and really thinking about it and looking into all the effects and needs of medical marijuana. And I supported that in the legislature. And I have a grandniece who is on that and has really helped her with her epileptic seizures and all. But I would not support legalization of drugs at this time. I think that they are gateways to deeper addiction, and it's just devastating.
Yes, I think it is too. Kind of leads us to another topic, affordable housing. It's really an important issue throughout the state. When you're in the more urban areas like Saratoga, you wonder if could they build another apartment building. Then, you get out into the rural areas and you see the people really struggle to find housing, affordable housing at all. Well, talk about that, May.
Well, housing is very important in the Adirondacks, and I did start an Adirondack Community Housing Trust a number of years ago. We just got them an additional $1 million, and what they do is help year-round residents within a certain income level that can afford to buy a house, but they give them $20,000 to $30,000 to help with a down payment. And then when they sell that house, it goes back to the housing trust. They have first option. But this past year, I've served as chairman of the housing committee in the Senate, so I've learned a lot about housing this year, more about the downstate housing. I certainly understood the needs of the North Country. When we talk about senior housing, a lot of my communities need 8 units, 10 units, not 40 units. We aren't big enough for that. And that's difficult to get funding for, or to get any housing corporation involved in doing that because it's so small. But this year, this is a program we had up north through Friends of the North Country, and they had a mobile home replacement project. And they would go to someone who had a mobile home that was dilapidated, and we know that mobile homes are like cars. They start to go down in value the minute you open the door. And the people would own the property, had a septic, had a well, and all that. So they would go in and build a stick-by house for them. And actually, it was almost 100%. They were getting grants of $60,000 to $80,000 to replace that mobile home with a manufactured home or a stick-built house built on site. And it not only helped the person that was there, it actually helps the community. And it raises the value of the community because the housing is now better. And the mobile home, part of the agreement was that mobile home had to be destroyed. And most of them were in need of being destroyed at that time. Right. So they haven't had any money in a long time. So this year in the budget, I got $2 million for a mobile home replacement, manufactured home replacement program. And we're going to be getting out the applications and seeing what we can do, and certainly hoping that we get a lot of interest in our area. It is statewide. And even one of the senators on Long Island said, oh boy, do I need that in my community. So I think it's something that will grow as it's used. We need to prove the need for this program this year.
You know, there's a lot of disparity in incomes. You know, you hear about it all the time. Steve, from your perspective, or the Green Party perspective, what do you feel the government's role should be here in affordable housing?
Well, I think, like with so many other things, I think rather than having a top-down administration of the money, I think very often the people who need it should be directly supported. I think we end up having a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse. We have a lot of grants that are for wonderful programs that are well-intentioned that I would support, but my impression is that a lot of this ends up coming down as patronage, and it benefits a few, and it sure sounds good and looks good, but for the people affected, I think they perceive this, and in many cases it seems to be fostering dependency rather than helping people up and be contributing members of the community.
That's a fine line. What do you think?
Well, Section 8 housing has helped an awful lot of people, and that's done locally. Senior housing, we have senior housing in Glens Falls and in our communities, and that's been very, very helpful to seniors. It gives them more social life. They take care of things for their yard. They have a nice place to live and can still stay in their own community. And there's money in this year's budget for homeless housing. And you know, we'd like to think in the North Country we really don't have homeless people, but they may not be out on the street, but they have inappropriate living, you know, going from couch to couch, or, you know, bunking in with somebody and not having a real place to call their home. So I think that money is well intentioned. We have so many wonderful volunteer groups who really work from the bottom up to see that they're getting this money to the people and it's not being wasted.
Got it. You know, move on to another topic. Energy. Energy dependency. Vermont, a lot of discussion about wind energy, renewable energy. It can be a controversial topic. You know, you could talk to one person and they see a windmill and they think it's beautiful. You know, another person says it's an eyesore to the landscape. What's your approach on this?
Well, when they first started putting in the wind towers up in the North Country, we heard from a few people, but in talking to people now, they say, I don't even notice them anymore. And they're very good, and we're getting more wind towers in the North Country, and we're seeing more solar farms, we're seeing more solar on people's roofs, so renewable energy is very, very important that we get there. And I've supported bills, actually had bills on net metering, so that, you know, there's a benefit if you're producing more than what you're using. And we had a meeting recently with small hydro. We have a lot of small hydro plants. I mean, they're small, they're not producing huge amounts of electricity, but what's cleaner than water power? And it's renewable and it's available. We're fortunate to have a lot of water. And so we had a gathering, we brought up the PSC, sat down at the table with the hydropower people, and they talked about their issues and their needs. And the new energy plan, hydro got some attention, and it was being overlooked. So I think that's key.
The Greens seem to make renewable energy and solar power a priority. Tell me about that.
Absolutely, and I think rather than just tax breaks for the wealthy to have the capital to invest on solar, I think we need to directly subsidize it because there's going to be payback for that. And I think anything we can do to decentralize and really have kind of public utility control over it. Right now, you know, the notion that we're going to subsidize nuclear, which is part of the governor's plan, I think it's a big mistake. So I'd like to see all of our efforts go into renewable. I would also like to do everything I can to fight any new fossil fuel infrastructure investments. I think it's a big mistake in terms of jeopardizing our water quality, jeopardizing the quality of our environment, and just the big picture. I think we need to stand with our brothers at Standing Rock and do what we can to just make a full switch to renewable energy by 2030, and it's doable, but it's going to take a big mobilization.
What do you feel about the governor's proposal?
No, we're making progress.
Yeah.
In the North Country, the wind actually is going to New England because the transmission lines in the grid that comes down from the North Country headed down towards more populated areas really isn't large enough. That needs to be expanded. And also on the natural gas issue, there's more that needs to be done bringing the natural gas into the Capital District so that we can expand the use of natural gas in the North Country. We have a lot of places that actually don't have natural gas. We just brought it, and I was involved in that, bringing it from the Canadian side down into Franklin County. And I was actually at North Country Dairy yesterday, and they now have natural gas as a result of that line. And the other one is the Cabot cheese in Chateauguay. They could, $30,000 a month it would save them in their energy costs. And all of these companies, they need to be efficient. And the more efficient they are, the better they can grow and the more jobs they can create. And what the North Country needs the most is more year-round residents. And they're not going to be there if you don't have jobs. So that's a big part.
You know what? Let's follow up on that. Jobs. What have you got in store to help?
Well, in Plattsburgh, there is a Norwegian company that's coming in that makes aerospace parts, and they have some new way of doing it, and they just had their first machine delivered last month. So we'll see where they go. We have a lot of, what happens is if I look at my district, certainly agriculture is a big job producer. We talked to a fellow yesterday that worked on a farm where they milk 1,500 cows every single day. And they milk around the clock. They actually have 4,000 cows there. So there are big farms like that in the area too. But when you look at the district, if you live in the southern part of my district, Warren, Washington County, and you can get to the Queensbury, Glens Falls area, there are good jobs there, and you can make a good living as long as you can commute down to those jobs. And then if you live in the northern part of the district, Plattsburgh has a lot of good jobs. Franklin County's getting better. We have a lot of state jobs. We have 9 prisons, and it's unfortunate that people have to be incarcerated, but they're in our area, and our correction officers do a good job with those prisons. But the middle, the small communities are not sustainable, and what we need there is broadband. Broadband's going to produce more jobs. People can come up here and work from home. They can stay an extra week, make a long weekend into a 5-day weekend, and so we're working on that. And we've gotten a lot of money to help subsidize it because, first of all, getting the broadband there and then convincing people to connect to it. Those that are going to work there will connect, but showing other people how it can help them as well.
We recently reported that along the corridor, the Northway, that exits 21 to 26, that they were considering creating zones for business. What are your feelings about that?
Well, I don't think it's right to make an unequal playing field in terms of giving public money to certain zones and not to others. I don't think that's fair. I do think that as far as the jobs, we need massive investment in green energy. So a Green New Deal is what I think we need across the park, and this is going to provide jobs in places like Franklin County. I don't like the idea of these economic development zones at all. Once again, I kind of think it's a mechanism for patronage, and I think a lot of this money can be better spent. I know it's going to local entities, but with these grants, there's often strings attached. So I guess I'm against that concept in principle.
I want to ask you about that specifically.
Well, before you look at all these new economic development zones, let's look at all the industrial parks we already have. Remember when we talked about shovel-ready parks? Well, there are a lot of them that are still shovel-ready and haven't had anyone come. So we have to attract those companies and utilize our smaller communities, making them more sustainable, utilize the, infrastructure parks they have, industrial parks.
Got it. Well, this time really flew by. We're going to take a break right now, and when we come back, give you both an opportunity to give us a closing statement. We'll be right back. There is nothing more important in the election process than for you to know where the candidates stand and what they care about. All the political coverage on Look Media is made possible by the generous support of the companies you see here. Please support them. Welcome back, everyone. Well, that time flew, and I want to thank my guests, Senator Betty Little and her challenger, Steve Ruzbacki, for joining me for this forum. And thank you for tuning in. Now, before we close, we're going to give the candidates time for a closing statement. We're going to start with Senator Betty Little. Betty?
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity to be here today and talk about the issues that are important to the people of the 45th District and certainly important to me. I serve on a number of committees in the Senate, and I think that we have done a number of good things for our district by getting rid of the GEA for our schools. There are 48 schools that I represent, school districts, and we're going to continue to work to see that we get the money and the allocations that we need to get in the North Country. Infrastructure, roads are important to tourism, all of those things, major issues. My first thought is always, how is this going to affect my district? And how are the people in my district going to be able to access any of these programs that are being developed? So I appreciate being able to serve in this capacity and really consider it a privilege. And today I would ask you for your vote this November.
Thank you very much, Senator. Steve.
All right. Well, I'd like to thank you both for this opportunity to discuss the issues, and I hope you all consider a different direction for our future. I think our policies have really not helped our children, and I think we need to try to create a more fair system for all of us. We need to share in the prosperity. Right now, I think our economy is really a two-tiered economy in the North Country. I'd like to do everything possible to try to restore grassroots democracy, restorative justice, and really a Green New Deal, a job that pays a living wage for anyone that wants one, because there's certainly enough work that needs to be done in our district. So I hope you'll look at my full platform. You can find it at www.votesteveforsenate.com. The green platform is peace, social justice, grassroots democracy, and ecological wisdom. And I think we can do a lot better.
Thank you both very much for coming in. Really enjoyed this conversation.
Oh, thank you. It's been nice.
Yes, it's been great. Hey, reminder to all of you, Election Day is Tuesday, November 8th. In this great democracy that we live in, one of our greatest rights is our ability to vote and elect leaders. I encourage you all to exercise that right on Election Day. Thanks very much for joining us. See you next time on Beyond the Headlines.